All the hogs.
How come there are no bees?
Where are the bees?
They're inside.
Oh, they're making honey?
Now they're handling. One is the sun.
Zachary is 6, and he's this little ball of energy, and he's a delight of a child, a bright thinker, very inquisitive, curious about everything around him.
All right, here I come.
Olivia is also a ball of energy in many ways. She really just adores Zachary and looks up to him in so many ways, and is also very curious about the world around her. And it's just such a pleasure raising them together and watching them interact.
In many ways, this is a typical American family. 2 young and happy children, parents whose love for those children knows no bounds. But for Sarit and Arnold Swanborn, the process of becoming parents was anything but typical. In fact, it was probably the greatest challenge either of them has ever faced.
We've been married for 6 years, and unfortunately we had a very hard beginning getting pregnant. I'm a very high-risk candidate, and it took several miscarriages for me to finally find the right doctor and get on the right medications to successfully carry our son to term.
But once Sarit gave birth to son Zachary, it quickly became clear that the hardest work of all was just beginning.
He actually had a very tough start. He weighed 3 pounds 15 ounces, was born 5 weeks early, and was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. We were told that the median age of survival was 30 years old when he was born. And so there was that whole issue of grappling with, mortality, of our son, and would we be childless at some point, or would there be a cure in his lifetime?
Despite their son's medical situation, Sarit and Arnold knew that they wanted Zachary to have a brother or a sister. They also knew that would present a challenge on a number of levels.
With both of Sarit and I being carriers of cystic fibrosis and the chance of having another child with cystic fibrosis, not only would that mean additional care for us, but it also puts the health of our son in jeopardy, because having 2 cystic fibrosis children together, they just breed on each other's germs, and it just makes it that much worse. So for us to look at other ways to grow our family was an important exploration that we needed to go through. And we talked about it a lot, and I said, why don't we just adopt? That seems like the right thing to do. Just like a moment of clarity. It's like an epiphany. Just sort of hit us.
Rather than going through a public adoption agency, the Swanborns chose to utilize the much more expensive services of an open private agency. In their minds, this gave them the greatest likelihood of getting a newborn, as well as the opportunity to become more familiar with the birth mother and family history of their future child. Unfortunately, the reality of what occurred did not live up to their expectations.
We were matched with this person in the first trimester, and after, a couple of visits to the mother, she just stopped communicating with us. So that was a red flag. And then, you get requests for additional money for doctor's visits, which don't happen, and things like that. And what you wind up finding out is these kids, some of them, they use this as a way of making money or as an income for them so they can live. And they're not always the most upstanding individuals.
While Sarit and Arnold were trying to deal with what was becoming an increasingly uncomfortable situation, something very unexpected happened.
I learned that I was pregnant, and we had a fork in the road situation. I was a very high-risk candidate, and we had the cystic fibrosis factor to consider. I didn't know if I could carry a second child to term. We didn't know what would come of our second child in terms of diagnoses.
Essentially, we said, we're pregnant now. We don't feel comfortable terminating. let's have a baby. Let's go that route. We wanted 2 children. We wanted to have siblings. We wanted to have, you know, a family where the 2 children would be able to play together. So we chatted to see how the pregnancy would go, and with all of the unknowns that held. So that was our decision.
And so the Swanborns themselves ended the adoption process. From that point forward, their focus was on making sure that Sarit had a healthy pregnancy and a successful delivery.
I knew I was very high risk, and I was on many medications. And one of the brightest days was getting a call into my first trimester that told us that our unborn child was indeed just a carrier and did not have cystic fibrosis, which meant that this child could live a life without the burden of that illness. So we were elated. We thought we had turned the toughest corner. And unfortunately, 8 months into the gestation of my pregnancy, our child's heartbeat stopped. And I had to deliver a stillborn. And that was probably horrible.
That was a little darker than the first baby.
Yeah. Because, you know, we wanted a child so badly, a second child, and we thought we'd licked the odds and were well on our way. And we lost her, and she was beautiful, and she looked just like our son, Zachary, just a split image of him. And with her loss went our dreams and our hope, and it was a really hard day. And what got us through the delivery of our stillborn daughter, who we named Tatiana, was the promise that we would adopt. My sister was in our room, and she said, "This is not over. You're going to have another baby," you know, and that was what got me through the darkest time, and Arnold, I think, as well.
For Sarit and Arnold Swanborn, the question of whether or not to have children was never really a question at all. The only question was how to go about achieving the goal that had eluded them for so long. But for other couples, the thought of having children can trigger a great deal of doubt and uncertainty and lead to an outcome that is very different.
Sherry and I considered having children. In fact, I think we had sort of a deal that we'd consider it was about every year, about every anniversary. We'd have a conversation about it and decide whether we, thought we wanted to or didn't want to. And really, I think it was something that just, after a period of time of deciding, well, maybe not yet, maybe we're not quite ready, eventually it got to where it was starting to be impractical just because of our age. I told Sherry, and I don't know how she felt about it, when she was growing up, but I always wanted kids. I thought I had a great childhood and a great family, and that was something I thought was important to me in my 20s and in my 30s.
I think I knew at a very young age I did not want children, but I had always reserved that if I met the right man and that was important to him, I would reconsider that. As Roger said, every anniversary we kind of took a vote, and we had decided if one of us said no, that was the way it was, and we both kept saying no. And so we did not, and I'm very comfortable with it.
Part of both of us were thinking, if we're having children, we need to provide them financial security. So you're building that kind of security, and before you know it, the time kind of gets away from you. And I'm perfectly happy with our lives together without the children. We've got tons of nieces and nephews, and we get to enjoy lots of kids that way. I don't know if someday we'll regret that we didn't have our own or not. I guess time will tell.
For Sherry and Roger McLean, both well-educated and highly successful, the decision came down to a careful analysis of the pros and cons of parenthood.
I think that I see many advantages to having children, but they all conclude at the end of 4 hours. So I enjoy children, but there's a lot I enjoy in my life that I would have had to have given up, including I have traditional values, and I happen to believe if you're going to have children that you should stay home and raise them. So that would have meant one of us giving up a career, and there was never a time when I felt that I wanted to do that, and I think Roger was at the same place.
Sometimes I used to think it would be great if you could have kids that were, already past the diaper stage, and a lot of the fun of kids I have always thought would be, when they start playing sports and things like that. Well, they don't start doing that till they're, 6, 7, 8, 10 years old. And it was those years, 1 through 3 that I always wondered, what's this gonna be like?
It's of interest to me right now also that we see our friends. We have friends of a variety of ages, and therefore we have friends now that have their kids and they're struggling to get them through college, and we have other friends that whether or not they can go out to dinner on Friday night depends on if the babysitter shows up, and we don't have that. I appreciate what they're doing and the young people that they've raised, and I do enjoy being around them, but it's nice to go home without them.
I mean, we do enjoy going out to dinner and going out to parties and things like that. And children take such a commitment of time. And also, as I say, I think part of me was always thinking we've got to have our financial house just in perfect order.
Probably my only regret would actually be for Roger, in that Roger loves sports. Baseball nut, a football nut, a golf nut, and we talked from time to time that he would have loved to have been like a Little League coach. Unfortunately, in today's world of child molestation, and if you're a grown man that wants to go coach a team of 8-year-old boys instead of others thinking that that's a wonderful thing and you have something to give, it's now thought of as weird. and you've almost put yourself at a personal risk. And so that's probably my only regret, is that you're not going to have a chance probably to do that.
I remember my mother telling me 35 years ago, no one can understand the type of love that a parent has for a child. And sometimes I think that we've missed that, because as much as we love our nieces and nephews, they're not our children. And so maybe we will never experience that type of love that a parent has for a child. Well, I guess I'll never know, but I regret that some, because when I talk to my friends who have children, you can tell, the way they beam when they talk about their kids. That's something Sherry and I will never have. So I think there's some sadness about that.
Sadness, and perhaps some regrets. But on balance, Sherry and Roger feel that they've made the best decision for them.
So often you hear about people who, tragically, when their kids are grown, they find they don't have anything in common anymore, and they divorce. So, that's sad too, because you got a couple of people that have spent 20 years with each other, and now their kids are gone, and they're looking at each other, and they have nothing to talk about. The kids are gone, so what's left between us? Well, Sherry and I don't have that to worry about, because we get to concentrate on our relationship.
The decision to focus on personal happiness and marital stability, rather than automatically plunge into parenthood, is becoming more and more common. While families in the late 19th century had on average about 6 children, the number of children per family today has dropped to only about 1.8.
I think that the real hot question here is what's happening, where's the end point of this trend? So we've seen, certainly comparing the 1950s to now, we've seen a reduction in the number of children people are having. Are we actually going to hit the end point where as a society we're heading towards having no children at all, which, as you don't have to be a sociologist to recognize that that would be disastrous.
If you look at many European countries, women are having very, very low fertility. The woman on average who has children may have a little over 1 child per woman. And so European countries are facing sub-replacement fertility, which means they aren't even able to replace their own populations.
While the U.S. demographic situation certainly hasn't reached that stage, the downward trend is unmistakable. A number of factors are often cited to explain the drop in fertility, but there's one overriding fact that stands out.
The biggest marital change is probably the decoupling of marriage and child rearing. It used to be the case, that's why you married. And if you ask people, what's marriage all about? Well, it's to provide a safe sanctuary for raising children. If you ask people today what the main purpose of marriage is, only about 20% of the population comes up with children.
One possible explanation is that children today are considered more of an economic liability than an asset.
Well, in the past, marriages were basically kind of economic units. Both husband and wife had clearly defined roles in the struggle for life, and you had lots of kids because kids basically helped you out economically, either in the home shop or on the farm or even child labor. Also, they took care of you when you were old, so the more children you had, the better chance of old age support you had. Today, they don't really help you in any labor sense. They're in school and then they go off to college.
The economic reasons are often framed in terms of the quantity and quality of children. This notion that there's a trade-off between how many children you have and how much you invest in each child. And that as societies come to put more and more value on raising high-quality children, by which they mean very educated, very expensive children, people are going to choose to have fewer of them.
This is a big reason why people are having fewer children. It's not the only reason. I think probably the biggest today is that you get used to, in a married couple without children, get used to a pretty free lifestyle where they can do whatever they want, and then suddenly the child comes and it completely upsets their apple cart. Marriage today is more and more oriented toward individual expression and individualism in general, and concerned with the self than ever before. And it really is the tail end of a long cultural change.
In today's setting, having a large number of children may be costly in terms of lost opportunities for parents to do other things. Particularly for women, a large number of children may have a cost in terms of lost opportunity for higher education, for participation in a fulfilling career.
What kind of lives do they want to live? It's a very different life that you've committed yourself to if you've got 6 children rather than 3, or 3 rather than 1.
Many people don't actually plan out their lives in such a way that they say, I am never going to have children. Some people do, but often the decision to remain childless actually comes about as the result of a series of decisions to postpone childbearing. Many people have some goal in mind, but then life happens. Things happen along the way.
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Hanson. Hi, thanks for coming back.
For example, postponing childbearing too long makes it much more difficult or even impossible for some couples to conceive.
If you look at the women that have infertility, they're usually older women, and most of the women who have chosen not to get pregnant until later on in life are also working women, so they also have this work ethic and have a fair amount of stress in their work environment. So here now you get into your early 40s and you want to have a baby. Because of the stress, you can't get pregnant, and therefore the only solution is to then help them with the reproductive technologies that we have today to do in vitro fertilization, to take their eggs, get them fertilized, and then to reimplant them, and that results in multiple gestations. And that causes a tremendous amount of stress and difficulty. So it's a vicious cycle.
Sometimes this is the first really big problem a couple's had to face, and often pretty unexpected, even though it's fairly common. So how well the couple's able to communicate is very important. And being able to accept, lots of times couples have different values that they place on having children.
You're right.
And helping them be able to talk with each other in an honest kind of way about that, and to support each other and to come to some decision about how far are they going to go in the technology process? When are they going to stop? Being able to take breaks from it, because it can be grueling and very hard emotionally as well as physically.
Sometimes the emotional challenges are intensified by painful interactions with family and friends, many of whom have no idea that the couple in question is having a problem.
Just wait until your first little one comes along.
So nobody really knows, and people are often forced to for example, go to baby showers and have in-laws ask them when are they going to have grandchildren, and they haven't felt comfortable being open about what's going on. So there's some social and family things that can make it additionally painful to go through the process.
For those couples who choose to use in vitro fertilization in order to conceive, there are other issues beyond just the question of will it work that need to be considered.
The technology is way ahead of where the emotional and interpersonal and ethical issues are. We're now pretty clear about counseling people and how to tell their children from the beginning. You know, there are many different ways that families are made. There's this way, that way, and here's the way that you came to be. And being able to tell a loving story like you might with an adoption or any other non-traditional way, I think avoids all the problems later of having a secret like this.
Where's the airplane in the sky?
Sarit and Arnold Swanborn were not interested in keeping secrets. They knew that if they adopted a child, they would need to tell that child the truth about how he or she came to be a member of the Swanborn family. But there was time before they'd have to worry about that. First, there was the matter of making it successfully through the adoption process.
I think everybody that we know, all of our friends, our family, were extremely supportive of our decision to adopt, knowing our history, you know, knowing the history of having difficult pregnancies and the potential of having another CF child. That there are many kids in need, you know, that need loving, and we'd be a good family for them.
We had a strong support system and a lot of encouragement to go forth, and everyone had an agency that we should work with and had a suggestion about it.
Arnold and Sarit felt an immediate bond with the woman who would become the birth mother of their future daughter.
She actually wrote a poem when she was pregnant with Olivia.
As a carrier of the child.
But not as the mother of the child. She'd known from day one that this baby wasn't going to be in her family. It was going to be given up for adoption. And she was a vessel for the birth of this child, and that's about it.
But she wrote this poem. It had so much poetic beauty to it and love. And we will read this to Olivia, so she knows that this came from love, and her mother wished her well.
Even before Olivia's birth, Arnold and Sarit began to prepare Zachary for what was to come.
He definitely saw us putting together a birth packet, and he saw his picture in it, and we definitely said, Mommy and Daddy know that there are many children in the world that need love, and there is a child out there who needs your love and our love, and wouldn't that be nice to bring a child into our lives? And I think that for what he could understand of it, it was intriguing.
I think the idea of a child or a sibling coming into their life is always interesting to any child until they get there.
Yes.
So, you know, to him, the idea of bringing somebody else into the family was great. You know, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to have him. It doesn't matter. To him, it didn't matter. He didn't know. He didn't know any different. And then she got there.
And then you had to share.
Then you had to share. I know, in a year and a half, almost 2 years later, we're still dealing with issues of not being able to share time, possessions, whatever it is.
Despite some typical sibling rivalry issues, Arnold is gratified that Zachary doesn't try to take advantage of Olivia's status as an adopted child.
And he's never said, oh, she's just my adopted sister. He's never said that. I don't know if he's aware of the fact that she's adopted or if it just never enters his mind that she is somehow a little bit different in the family than he is.
Actually, he is very aware that she's adopted because he has made a statement to me. He's very, very bright and aware of his surroundings and things that are happening. And he has said, Mommy, take her back. She needs to go back. She cannot be a part of our family right now, only because he was very upset about something and he didn't know how to push my button other than to say that. So he is aware, but
See, he's hiding it from me.
Right, he's hiding it from you. But that also tells us that we need to sit down with both of them and have a conversation about the fact that she is adopted very early on, and we're not going to wait until she is a teenager or older. First of all, Zachary and all of his young 5-year-old cousins will blow the whistle long before we can have that discussion if we don't.
Good night, Mom.
So she will know at a very tender age.
And we'll have to have that tough discussion with both of our kids. You know, we have to tell Zachary he's got cystic fibrosis and tell our daughter Olivia that she's adopted. And to us, that makes our story of our family that much richer.
Because after losing our daughter at 8 months gestation, we had empty arms, we had aching arms. We needed to fill that spot. And we feel complete inside in every way because there was that question mark at the end, and we didn't feel that we had our complete family picture yet. She is the poster child of adoption. She is just amazing. She's a good eater. She's a happy kid. She's a healthy kid. We don't take any day for granted that we have her, and we look forward to raising her.
Our Families Ourselves is an 18-part series about marriages and families. For information on this program and accompanying materials, call 1-800-576-2988 or visit us online at www.intelecom.org.